All right, guys. So, as you can see, we're in week 2 now. The quiz, definitely, if you haven't done that already, the quiz is due in 1 day, or 5 hours, 36 minutes. So it's due Wednesday night. The next assignment, major assignment that you have is the Immersive Audio Skills Development Part 1. Now, this one is due, as you can see, Thursday night. And what we're going to be showing you here in Immersive Skills Part 1 is EQing. Now, I like to just kind of start you guys off. There's a few things for you to follow along with the assignment. We point you towards lynda.com, for instance. There's go to Audio Mixing Bootcamp by Bobby Owensky and watch the following segments. We give you learning about EQ, all segments. So you get to watch 36 minutes and 5 seconds of it. Now, one thing I like to point out is the EQ that he was using in that video is actually a Pro Tools EQ. It's the Digi-Rack EQ. We don't have that one in Logic, but all EQs are exactly the same. Every single EQ will have, like for instance, what we're dealing with here is a fully parametric EQ and shelving EQ, as well as filters. This one here is exactly as this one. Both of them have parametric EQs, both of them have shelving EQs and filters. You'll notice here it says frequency. So you could actually set up your frequency for one of the EQs, and over here is frequency. You could set up frequency for that EQ. So it's just different methods of doing it. One's a knob, one's numerical. This one shows you graphically, and you could even control the graphics, and I'll show you that for controlling that frequency or gain, amplitude, in other words, the level. And then lastly, your Q. You'll notice Q over here. We have Q also on this EQ. So they're exactly the same thing. All EQs will have basically those 3 controls: frequency, amplitude, and Q. So parametric Qs, you'll be able to kind of translate it any single EQ that you might run into as far as parametric. Now, what does an EQ do? Or what does an EQ does, I should say. You guys might remember or have seen, maybe your parents had a stereo system and you had one of these. This is an EQ, very basic EQ. This is one's called a graphic EQ. Now, we use the graphic EQ to kind of change the way the sound works. So just like you have in Logic, you have physical faders for each track. Imagine that you actually have faders for each frequency within a track. And that's what a graphic EQ basically does. You have a number of faders. So the frequencies are divided across from low to high, and you're able to basically control levels of those different frequencies. You may have seen EQs like this one. Here's a Pioneer one. You'll see that above each fader, you actually have a number. That number is actually the frequency. So for instance, this fader, its frequency basically is controlling 60 Hertz. Now, it will create a curve because the center frequency might be 60 Hertz, but it's also going to affect frequencies below it as well as above it. This one, as you can see, is 150, then 400, 1000 or 1K, 2.4K, 6K, and 15K. Graphic EQs are very simple. If you're starting to get into live sound, you might see one like this where it actually has 31 bands. So it gives you a lot more control than those simple ones that are only 5 bands, for instance, in a lot of your home stuff. You have each one of these at the center. If you play music through, it doesn't change anything. If you bring it up, you're boosting a frequency. If you bring it down, you're bringing down or cutting that frequency. The 31 band EQs, you'll see them in a lot of live setups. If you because you need to EQ out a room, for instance, to make it sound better, get rid of problems that it might be in the room. So these are the type of things that you see a lot in live situations. In the studio, you won't have them as much. You'll have more so the parametric EQ, which I'm going to be showing you guys next. Now, you will, as you guys could see, download, where is it? All right, right there. You'll need to download this logic file. Once you've downloaded it, you can open it up, and you'll notice it gives you quite a few different things already. Now, this is not something to sit down and try to mix this. These are individual tracks that you're going to walk through the instructions and listen to that sound and mess around with the EQ to really see what your EQ is capable of doing. With this assignment, we're only going to be messing with, for part 1, you're going to be messing with 4 tracks. In other words, the white, the 100 hertz square wave, the 1K square wave, and then lastly, this applied EQ lesson, which you'll hear my vocal along with some problems that are in that vocal track or vocal recording that we actually can fix. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do. One thing that this assignment has you do is you're going to be reading along, following the instructions as to what you need to do with the EQ. You'll see right here, we actually have project notes and track notes. When you have a track selected, you'll notice the track notes change. Those track notes are part of the instructions. So you'll need to make sure that you have, first of all, logic needs to be set to the advanced settings. How we do that is under logic, preferences, advanced tools, and you should have already done this, but just to make sure you guys have it, you'll click on this that says show advanced tools. Otherwise you'll have the wood sides, and I'll go ahead and change that real quick. You'll have these wood sides, and notice that, wait a minute, all my instructions are gone. So that's one of the features that the advanced tools gives you. You could actually have individual track notes. So you definitely want to have that clicked to show you all your instructions. Otherwise you won't have the instructions. So as you select each track, you'll notice those instructions change. But let's come back over here. Something else, as you work on these things, we're going to have you guys write 2 to 4 sentences about what you've learned or heard on each track. Now, what I mean by heard is, okay, I noticed that my EQ is really capable of removing things, or, you know, explain what you're actually doing. Not, for instance, the first track is white noise, not something like, oh, it sounds like waterfall, which you'll notice that's what white noise sounds like. So I don't want to see something written as to, oh, it sounds like a waterfall. I want to hear what happened when you engaged the EQ and what you were doing. Now, I am going to quickly set up one other EQ. So I want to show you this stuff first. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. What I'm setting up is a graphic EQ. The EQ, let me move these as far as position. I'm going to make the graphic EQ first. All you need to do is click and drag to be able to do that. The reason I'm doing that is I want to use the other EQ because there's a neat feature called an analyzer, so that way you can see what's happening. Well, let's see. Hit play. And you're able to see, let me scoot this up. You can see that line. That's showing you what frequencies are happening within that track. So because it's white noise, we have equal amount of energy throughout all frequencies. That's what white noise basically is. And that gives us a great way of showing you. I'm going to hit play again, and I'm going to start showing you just on the graphic EQ. You'll see, instead of it being straight across the way it was, you'll see how I could actually niche out stuff. And I'm going to even make this a 10 band so it's even more noticeable. So go to 1K, for instance, and I bring it down. Notice I created a dip right here at 1K. If I boost it, notice it's boosted. I boosted right there at 1K. So you're able to see how I could control the level of certain frequencies. Did you also notice that, hey, it affected other frequencies beside the 1K? It created a bell. That bell shape is also called a bandwidth or the Q. So when I bring up the 1K, think of it as it's going to affect frequencies like this. It's basically creating a bell shape here. So when I boost it, the 1K is the center frequency, but it also affects all other frequencies over towards the next fader, which is 512 in this case, and 2K on the other side. So that's what a graphic EQ does. And you're kind of limited because I can't change the bell or the Q, the bandwidth, in other words, how many frequencies it's affecting. All I could do is control the gain with that center frequency being fixed. But let's say if I really, there's a certain frequency right here, I can't use this fader, I can't use this one because then I affect too much of the vocal. I want to affect only that. Well, that's where the parametric EQ gives you so much more capabilities. I'm going to go ahead and close this graphic EQ right now. We're not really going to need it. In fact, I'll go ahead and shut it off. So we're just going to use the channel EQ. Now with the channel EQ, you have these numbers right here. You'll see it's color coded also, which makes it kind of useful. So let's grab this green one here, and if I click and drag, notice that green ball and even that area kind of slides back and forth. So I'm able to change the frequency by clicking and dragging, or I could come right to the ball itself and click it and drag back and forth. Notice I could also drag it up, drag it down. I could do the same numerically, just click and drag on the number. So you have multiple ways of controlling your EQ settings. The top one is, again, frequency. The middle one is amplitude, and then lastly is your bandwidth or Q. Q, notice what it does. When I change the Q, I'm actually changing how many frequencies I'm affecting when I boost or cut. Let's go ahead and boost, and I'll show you. So here we are with really tight Q or really tight bandwidth. It's only affecting a couple frequencies on each side. If I take that and widen it, you'll notice, okay, now I'm changing it. I can affect a lot more frequencies. I mean, it's going to affect all the way over here and this way. So this parametric EQ gives you a lot more features. Unlike the graphic EQ, which all I could do was change the amplitude, in other words, bring it up and down, I could actually now bring it up or down in volume or amplitude. I could also switch the center frequency, as well as also how many frequencies or the bandwidth that EQ is affecting. You could also change the Q. If you notice right on the dot, I move the dot up and down, but if I go over to the sides, I could just click, hold, and drag it back and forth, and you're able to change the Q as well. If you move it right to this point, you'll notice now I can literally do anything up, down, side to side. So you're able to control this graphically as well as also numerically. Anything you change graphically, the numeric representation will show you down below what you're doing. And let's go ahead and hit play, and you'll see how I can have a lot more control. We use the white noise for you guys so that way you have frequencies across the whole spectrum. Notice there, it's just a little peak. I could take out areas. If I sweep it, it sounds like waves. I mean, I could create all kinds of sound effects using white noise. Everything from, as you heard, what sounded like waves to rain to I can envelope it and create hi-hats and anything else. So you'll be learning how strong the EQ really is to help you in your mix as well as also sound designing. So that's how you control this parametric EQ. Now, let me bring up something I drew. Where are you? There it is. Okay. I drew this. Oops, of course it bumps onto the other. So this is an enlarged version of that same EQ you were just messing with, or I was showing you. Notice that you have 4 parametric EQs. Those were the ones that I was just messing with. You can move, of course, their center frequency left to right. It could control anything. So 4 total. Then we have something called a low shelving and high shelving EQ. That's shown by this symbol. Notice that with the parametric, it's created that bell. With the shelving EQ, notice it starts the bell, but then it just kind of shelves off that frequencies. So the high shelving and low shelving, I'm going to show you guys next. And then lastly, notice that we also have those filters. High pass filter, you'll notice the line goes up and across. Think of it as it's allowing the high frequencies to pass. Another name for this is also low cut, because I'm cutting or bringing down the low frequencies. And then last over here, the low pass filter, or you could call it high cut filter, gives you that capability of, allowing only the low frequencies to pass through. So let's try that. I'm going to keep using the same white noise so that way you can really see. I'm going to show you the shelving, for instance. Let me zero this guy out. Okay, here's the high shelving. So I could bring it up, I could bring it down. From wherever I have my frequency, it shelves the rest of the high frequencies above it, whether it's positive or negative. Now, a lot of people are probably used to the sound of this, where you have that capability where you're just shelving frequencies, and they quite often call them tone knobs. Like a guitar will actually have a tone knob. Really what it is basically one of these. You're shelving off frequencies. So it basically, makes the low end sound louder, or the high end sound louder. So you're able to just control the tonality of that, whether it's guitar or anything else. So that's the high shelving. The low shelving, exact same thing, but notice it goes low. So I can boost the lows or filter out the lows, or bring them down, I should say, not filter. Filter will show you next. All right, so those are shelving. We're able to actually control our general sound. The last two that are on here, we have to turn them on normally. You'll notice if I click on this is how you could turn on and off, which is great. Like for instance, let's say you want to hear the difference. What did your EQ do? You turn it on, so you're able to turn on and off that certain EQ that you were playing around with, just to hear the difference. But with the filters, here you can see it's the low pass filter. In other words, I'm able to pass all low frequencies from where I have my, center frequency of that filter. If I just grab it, bring it across, you'll notice it completely can get rid of all those high frequencies. This slope doesn't just flatten out the way the shelving does. it continues sloping down to where there's no energy, you know, at these higher frequencies. So it's filtering out those highs. In other words, that's why we could call this a high cut. We're cutting those high frequencies, only allowing the low frequencies. And you could see here on the analyzer that, hey, that's all that's passing through. In fact, you guys may not hear it because if you're on headphones, your headphones can't really produce that 50 hertz and so forth. But you're able to see that literally, as I bring it up, you can control where that knee frequency happens. That can be changed here. The other thing you could have is your slope. This 24 dB per octave slope can be changed to 6 dB. So you notice it's not as drastic. Or I can make it 48, which is more what they call getting close to a brick wall filter, where you're really from that frequency just cutting all frequencies above it. There is one more feature that this has, and it's kind of like if you had a synthesizer. Besides just filtering out the way a synthesizer does, I can also do this. I create a resonant peak. So that's like the resonance knob on a lot of synthesizers. What is a synthesizer? Sorry. So a synthesizer is a keyboard that you're able to design all your sounds. Most synthesizers will give you oscillators, they'll give you filters, a little mixer where you can combine stuff, and you're able to really design sounds. A very famous synthesizer that is out there is the Moog, the Mini Moog, which came out in 1965 or so. It actually gave you all those basic features so that you could start designing sounds, and it created a whole revolution in sound because you can now create sounds. I see somebody's talking about a Euro rack. That's where you have a modular. You could actually have all these modules and design all kinds of stuff. Can't we do that in Logic without a synthesizer? Somebody's asking. Yes, you're seeing I'm able to basically do that type of thing here. So there's that resonant peak that you could create, and that's just by boosting, as you saw over here, how this Q or bandwidth of that filter works. So I bring up the Q, and then as I narrow it quite a bit, and I create a resonant peak, much like a synthesizer. All right, if you want to get rid of that, you just click it. It gets rid of the that EQ settings. Here is the opposite, the high pass. So, oh, come on. You can see this filters out all the low frequencies, just allowing only passing those high frequencies, hence high pass filter. We could also call this a low cut because you notice it cut all the low frequencies. Now, it's not in the assignment, but I'm going to show you really quick. I'm going to create another audio track. Okay. And we're just going to, where are you? I've got, here. I'm going to throw this in here. Grab an EQ on that and show you some of the things that an EQ can do, for instance, on a whole track. I guess I need to solo that one. So let's say we have a song like that. Every day, every day, oh yeah. You can notice, let me pull this off of here. I could just use a filter. Every day, oh yeah. You've probably heard this on some of the songs where they filter out the high frequencies as part of the song, and then you hear it opening up. And you can automate this. Any of these EQ parameters that I'm actually turning, you can actually have something called automation, which you'll get to see a little bit later, where I can now automate the song to filter out that way. For instance, here's the high pass.
Every day, oh yeah, wanna thank and pray.
So just wanted to show you real quick how you could filter out parts of a song, for instance, with the parametric EQs.
Praises people most high. Yes, I do. Every day, every day. Oh yeah.
If I thought the bass needed to come up, I can find the bass where it's playing more or less and boost it a little bit. So you're able to really go through the sound and even surgically remove parts that you don't like or like. So you can boost them a little bit. Well, that's what the EQ could do. You could really tailor it to where you're making the sound the way you want to. All right. So for this assignment, that's what you're going to be doing is you're going to be following along in the notepad, you know, the track notes, and it's going to, I guess I just added that one, so there's nothing there. But you're going to start messing around with those things that I just showed you, the high pass filters, the low pass filters, the parametric EQs, the shelving EQs. You're going to mess with them. It'll walk you through, start turning the knobs, start seeing what it does. And then last, besides taking a screenshot, because you'll need to take screenshots as you guys go along. Like, let me just open this up. Let's say, okay, there's my white. The first track, the white noise. I take a screenshot of what I'm doing, and the 2 to 4 sentences that we asked for, just put down, hey, I found that with the parametric EQ, I was really be able to control the frequency, and then the Q itself, or bandwidth, gave me the capability of really selecting which frequencies I would be affecting. So that's what you're going to be doing for these. You'll be taking screenshots as you go through each one. The last one, let me solo that one and show you. Last one, if you listen to it.
By using your EQ, you're able to remove unwanted frequencies and make the vocal clearer. By using your EQ, you're able...
You can hear it's my voice. And I'm speaking on there, but I don't know if you're noticing, there is
by using your EQ,
two problems.
You're able to remove unwanted frequencies.
Especially if you're listening through speakers, you'll hear that low frequency hum that's happening, and then some sort of high-pitched squeal that's also happening. If I just loop, let me come over here. This is what I would do. I would go and go, ooh, I've got a really bad sound in there I don't like. But I don't want to affect the full vocal, because if I just EQ it out with a filter, yes, I got rid of the problem, but I also got rid of my vocal. I don't want that. So quite often what I do is I'll loop the area that's not where the speech is, but it was still being recorded. And here I could see, wow, there's a definite problem there, and look at that spike happening there. I can go and use my EQ to surgically, literally remove that frequency, and I could also get rid of this low frequency. And that's what we want you guys to do, is you're going to tackle this noisy vocal, as we call it, without destroying the vocal. Because let's say here, if I just turn on a filter, I'm going to show you something. There, I got rid of that high frequency problem. And then here, I could turn on this guy and do that, and sure enough, I don't really hear it. It's brought down. But watch what happens when I bring my vocal.
Able to remove unwanted frequency. By using your EQ, you're able to remove
I almost sound like I'm an old telephone signal. So it's no longer a good sounding vocal. I've just destroyed my vocal by getting rid of those two things very drastically. So I can use other tools in my palette, in my EQs, to be able to fix those two problems. And by the time you've gone through the first 3 tracks, hopefully you'll understand which tools to grab to be able to get rid of those problems. For instance, you know, one of them happens to be a frequency that you don't like, very high frequency. Well, I would boost it first to find it, then change my Q, fine tune again, find it. Once I found it, it's very loud, I hate it, bring it down. That will kill just that frequency without touching the stuff on each side. So in other words, you'd still be able to hear my vocal, and we'd only be taking out that one problem frequency. And if you still hear it, another trick that you could do is to give you even more control. Is there's nothing wrong with stacking 2. So for instance, I bring this back over. See, this one's at 2,150. So move it over a little bit. There we go. They're both on the same frequency. Bring this guy down also. And well, that's too much bandwidth. So I come over here and I change it also. So having 2 of them right on top of each other affecting the same frequency will give you minus 24 dB and another minus 24 dB, totaling minus 48 dB at that physical frequency. So I'm able to literally surgically remove, you might say, that really nasty high frequency, for instance, and hey, you still have a vocal that you're able to use. So we leave number 4 kind of up to you guys. Come over to number 4. This will be track number 4 because this one won't be here. Let's get rid of this. Alright, so this is the way your assignments look. It's track 1 through 4. On track number 4, once you've gone through these first 3, you should be able to understand how to use your EQs to be able to fix that track. I have 2 problems on the track. One is a low frequency hum. The other one is a high frequency problem. Those are 2 real world situations. I've actually had tracks that came to me recorded somewhere else that had problems like this. The low frequency is usually called something a ground loop, and the ground loop is where they've wired up their studio incorrectly and there's problems and you end up with this hum. Ground loops can also be heard in live situations, but you're able to EQ out that ground loop problem. So that way you could still use this vocal. Because, for instance, these tracks were sent to me, they were recorded somewhere else. I can't just call the vocalist to come back out. The vocalist has already recorded, he's left, so I need to fix this problem. I can do that with the EQ. And it's using my EQ parameters and understanding what they do as to how I could tackle those 2 different problems. On track number 4, that's what you're needing to do. You need to fix those 2 problems, and we're going to have you bounce down this track. So keep it soloed. You come over to the bounce project or selection. So if you have it selected, great, it'll bounce down that whole vocal. And if not, another way of doing it is to make the loop section here the full length of the vocal. Another place to hit bounce, as you guys can see, I have this little button right here, it's bounce. It's whenever we have the output, it's there. Click on that, and again, the features will pop up. You select MP3, which is what we want. This one's spoken word, so 128 is fine. Since there's no other frequencies really happening, it's just my voice. 128 will be fine. I would normally either 128 or higher, but click OK. Oh, I must point out, you'll have to have your EQ settings set up correctly. If I have it flat like this, then all I'm going to get is the exact same thing that's on that track. We want to have the EQs taking out those two problems that I was just talking about. That way, when I hit play on this MP3 that you're going to send of this vocal, hopefully I don't hear the low frequency problem nor that high frequency problem. This walks you through, even tells you a little bit about the answer. Try to tackle it on your own. You can read the first part of this. It tells you a little bit about it, but try it on your own, see if you can tackle it. If not, then hey, the answer is basically there. So that way you can really start seeing what to do when you have to fix situations. EQs are actually better to cut than they are to boost. As you go through Full Sail, you'll learn more about it. You're actually playing with the phase of the signal a little bit. So they always say it's better to cut than to boost if you want to keep the thing sounding as natural as possible. All right, that's basically it. And coming back over here, remember, use your grading checklist. We need the screenshots of the session. Remember, it's 1 screenshot per track, so it's going to be 4 screenshots. The 2 to 4 sentences about what you learned from each track. So that's 2 sentences at least, on track number 1. 2 more sentences on track number 2. 2 more sentences on track 3, and then track 4. These are just minimums. So 2 to 4. If you give me 5, 10, great. I don't mind it. It really shows me that you're understanding this, as well as also I could give you even more feedback. Like, for instance, if you tell me something in there that's not totally true or not making sense, I can explain it more in depth to really get, so that you get the concept down. The next thing, as you can see, submit the completed logic session. In other words, everything that you've done, you've turned on the EQ, you've done EQ settings and everything, you save this and submit it after you've done the actual tracks 1 through 4. So submit that logic session. It's going to be named last name underscore first name. In other words, your last name, your first name, underscore RPR Immersive Part 1. The next thing you'll notice is, remember how I said you had to bounce a track? Track number 4, we need you to submit the bounce, or the MP3 of it, at 128 kilobytes per second, MP3, and it's the one that's cleaned up. In other words, we don't want you to just bounce what's on there. We want you to first clean it up, then send it to us. So the cleaned up vocal, that's part of the assignment as well. And then lastly, of course, if you're late, you end up getting points docked. So that's the Immersive Part 1.